Alright, what's good, y'all? Soul here, and welcome back to my story mode. So, I'm sure that a lot of you probably got this notification or saw it on your homepage and probably groaned. Because surely, there is no way that once again we are talking about anything in regards to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Believe me, y'all, I'm just as sick of talking about it as you guys are of hearing about it. However, amongst all of the major leaks that happened last month, there was a tiny little something that was kind of interesting that caught my eye that I didn't want to just completely ignore. And so, with all of that being said, make sure that you take any and all pieces of information that have been leaked with a grain of salt because we don't know what's actually true or what's been changed. Especially because a bit of what's said here is mostly speculation on part of the leaker. And as ridiculous as that sounds, once I explain this, I feel like this is definitely something still worth having a conversation about. And so, with all of that on the table, you guys already know the drill. Let's go ahead and lock in to talk about this. Go ahead and grab yourself a snack, possibly a meal. Go ahead and maybe grab a bottle of mustard and smother that all over your bulgogi. And let's go ahead and talk about this possible leak about Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. In this particular situation, the leaker themselves did not want to address or specifically explain the source code that they found. And obviously, as we explained, it was a source code that had something to do with Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, something that has not been released yet. Now, as unreliable as Central leaks can be a lot of the time, they did bring up a very interesting point. For some odd reason, the leaker did not want to put out this very specific information. Why they would do something like that is very strange considering the fact that there were already so many things leaked out into the world. Central Leaks speculated that the hacker wouldn't share because they're worried that an upcoming Pokemon in-game event can be cancelled, or there could be leaks in relations to the Switch 2. Now obviously, we have to sit with that for a second because it is very strange either way. Both of them do seem outlandish until you really sit there and think about it. In the case of an upcoming in-game event, that does seem like a very ridiculous reason to hide it. Literally, to this day, we still get very consistent updates and in-game events for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Hell, at the time of this recording, we just got an announcement for Shiny Black Rayquaza in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet as a raid event. So unless it is something like stupidly major that's really truly not worth the risk or something that people will actually be hyped about, there is absolutely no reason to hide this information. In the very specific case of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, I think it is safe to say that we have gotten more content for this game more than most other Pokemon games ever post-launch. The events are one thing, whether it be raid battles or whatever else, they've been doing that forever for the past 2 years. However, one thing people do tend to forget is that literally at the beginning of this year, in January, we got an extra tidbit of story DLC. In everyone's defense though, it's very forgettable. I forgot about it so hard that I didn't even make a video about it, which is really bad. But regardless, that could possibly mean that it is something of that caliber, or we're getting another set of DLC packs, which would be very strange considering how late we are into the life cycle of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. And again, why would we hide something like this? With that, I'm having a very hard time mapping out. Couldn't really tell you. This next part though is what really caught my attention. There can be leaks in regards to Switch 2. Now that right there is where things start to click. It's one thing to specifically leak the games and whatnot in regards to Pokemon Company specifically. That's one thing, that's why the leaks got as out of hand as they did. But getting Nintendo involved? That is a mistake you do not want to make. Everybody and their mamas know good and well that the Nintendo ninjas have been working in the shadows for the better part of a decade now to shut down any and all potential leaks in regards to any major announcements from Nintendo. And if there's one thing that they've done a decent job with, it is absolutely exterminating any accurate leaks in regards to the Switch 2. Now don't get me wrong, there are some he said she said things that are out in the wild in regards to the Switch 2 about the magnetic Joy-Cons and things like that, yada yada yada. Hardware stuff, no big deal. We don't know how much of that is genuinely true, which is why it's easy for that nonsense to float around because it's whatever. However, in this very specific situation, people's homes and livelihoods and names got completely doxxed with this leak, meaning that a good majority of this stuff was relatively true. to some degree at least. And considering the fact that Pokemon is always going to be Nintendo exclusive, it makes sense that there's going to be information floating around out there in regards to software stuff for the Switch 2. And so, if that were the specific situation, I don't think I could blame the hacker for not wanting to give out specific details on this source code if it could literally put their life in jeopardy. We have seen Nintendo bring the hammer down. I am scared of a lot of things in this life, but the idea of being face to face with a Nintendo lawyer is easily a top 10. You do not want that smoke. They literally managed to get away scot-free from the Joy-Con case. You remember that? You know, the situation in which the lawyer got the judge to agree that, yeah, no, Joy-Con drift isn't an actual problem. Do you see what I'm saying here? That is not smoke that you want, because that is absolutely the most ridiculous thing that they have easily gotten away with. I'm not dealing with that either. I completely get it. Now, getting back on topic here, with all of that being said, there is floating around a source code for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, possibly involving the Switch 2. Now, of course, this could absolutely mean nothing. We did recently get confirmation that the Switch 2 is going to have backwards compatibility. So, maybe, possibly, this update for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet is just to make sure that it runs okay or decently on the Switch 2 for all we know. And, you know, that in of itself is totally fine and dandy. That's very likely and very possible, probably the most likely scenario. However, there is that inkling of a feeling, that inkling of a possibility that there is more going on there. As ridiculous as it sounds, there may have truly been a definitive edition in progress for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet for the Switch 2. Let me make it clear that I fully believe that this is very unlikely given everything that's happened with Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, and yet it is easily one of the best-selling Pokemon games on the market. They have absolutely zero reason not to take Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, do some touch-ups, make the game look a little bit better, add all of the DLC and extra content that we've gotten over the past 2 years, and just sell that as a definitive edition on the Switch 2, because that would still kinda sell. We could finally be once again looking at another Pokemon Emerald, Pokemon Platinum situation. Maybe we could be looking at Pokemon Magenta. Because when you really truly look at those games, Pokemon Emerald and Platinum really are just definitive editions of their respective generations. And once Pokemon Legends ZA drops, they're definitely gonna want to take a little bit of extra time to work on whatever the next major project is after that. So, something like a middle ground so that they could save time and money, like a Pokemon Magenta, where all they have to do is make a couple of easy solid touch-ups to the graphics and things like that, and they could easily get away with something like that. In this particular context though, what would definitive mean? It's been well over 15 years since we received our last quote-unquote definitive edition, Pokemon Platinum. So to justify a purchase like that, they would have to definitely make a lot more hefty changes to make that purchase worth it. Let's go down the obvious stuff, starting with fixing the graphics. One thing that most of us can agree on, whether you enjoyed the game or not, and this is coming from somebody that very much enjoyed the game looks like ass. They gotta smooth out the styling, they gotta make all of those trees and pop-in look a lot better than they do, make things look a little bit smoother on the eyes. The models of the people and the Pokemon are absolutely fine, I could definitely work with that. Everything else surrounding them looks questionable. Okay, well actually, let me take a step back here. Not exactly everything. I personally believe that the insides of the buildings that we can go into look totally fine. It's when you go outside into the open world and see all of these gross empty patches of land that look disgusting with almost nothing present there until you get close enough for the pop-in to really showcase itself is when I start to have a bit of a problem. If I were y'all, for this definitive edition, if that's a real thing, I would get a couple of pointers from Monolith Soft about their work in Xenoblade and Zelda, and you guys might be in good hands. And don't get me wrong, I still give the benefit of the doubt to Game Freak because of of how they've been rushed into making a lot of these games. They've done good with what they had to work with. However, as we've stated quadrillion times by now, they have absolutely no reason not to be able to take a little bit of extra time to work on graphical capabilities. You can only make so many excuses about the Switch being weak hardware until you see literally the first game that was released on it and a lot of other open world games afterwards. Sorry, but we can't defend you anymore. And then of course, there's the second major issue, which is the frame rate. It dips way too consistently, way too often. There is not a single moment in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet that I remember it clearly running smoothly. Pokemon battles, they're decent. You start walking, oh boy, it's taking a dip. Uh-oh, weather changes, oh boy, it's starting to struggle. God forbid you get on your Bikemon and move anywhere, you are getting screwed over by that frame rate. I'm just saying, man, updates to one, two, or both of those things, and you have already more than garnered the attention of a good majority of the fan base. The only reason that a few people, and I mean a very few people that I know, did not go out of their way to finish the game is because it looks and feels gross, and you can't really fight them back on something that is legitimate fact. I like to give a lot of the games that I play the benefit of the doubt, which means looking past a lot of jank, and I mean a lot of jank. I'm a Sonic fan, for Christ's sakes. And you know what? It's very ironic that I bring that up, considering the fact that they just released Sonic X Shadow Generations just last month. Now, granted, Sonic Generations was one of the more well-received games in the series, but regardless, they smoothed out the gameplay a lot by fixing up the graphics and frame rate, as well as added a lot of new content to indulge in, and it's easily one of the best-selling Sonic games in a hot minute. Which generally just goes to show that with a little bit of love, care, and extra time, you can truly make the world your oyster, and in the case of Pokemon and Game Freak, they can absolutely learn from what they made mistakes on and make a really good definitive edition that people will rave about for years to come. You guys already know me good and well. I have talked frantically about the idea of a sequel to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. I am avid about that idea. Because they were undercooked, I really don't think that Pokemon Scarlet and Violet and the start of Generation 9 in reality did not really get much of a fair shake. Which again is very weird to say considering how successful that game is, but regardless. I think that if they really are taking advantage of the Switch 2's hardware and making it so that this game looks and runs a lot smoother, I think that they could benefit from that a lot. Now, one thing that we simply cannot ignore if this truly is something that's in development is the DLC that's already present in Scarlet and Violet. There is no justifiable way in hell that you can make people pay a second time for the same exact DLCs that we already got beforehand. So you guys would absolutely need to bite a bullet here, because the best way that you would make money off of something like this is to include all of the DLC that was present beforehand. Now, of course, I have to imagine this from the perspective of a normal person, because unfortunately, I am a PokeTuber, which means that I would most likely pick the game up regardless. But think about it this way. The average Joe in the year of 2025 or 2026 has already played Pokemon Scarlet and Violet and all of the DLCs. Everybody and their mamas are still suffering from money problems and rent is still very much due. And all of a sudden, they decide to release Pokemon Magenta for the Switch 2 because we've already had it for the better part of a year or so now. However, there is no word or confirmation that we have DLC available at launch for this definitive edition. The sane average Joe is absolutely 100% going to skip out on it. And he would have absolutely every right to, because he already has the full experience at home, even if it is a little bit jankier. And so, I think I've made it very clear that if a definitive edition is in development, there is absolutely no shot in heaven that they don't include the DLC as well. It is by and far the best possible way to actually make any form of profit off of that game. I mean, hell, I personally know a ton of people that skipped out on the DLC. However, I could absolutely see a situation in which they are presented with something like this mythical Pokemon Magenta that has touched-up graphics and frame rate, as well as all of the DLC included in one big package. I mean, especially during a time where we're very likely going to need a lot of games to play on the Switch too, I feel like that's a pretty hard deal to pass up. Or potentially very easy if you're sick enough of Pokemon, but I don't know. So I was looking at this, and overall I was thinking, is this overall a good idea if this is actually the case? On one hand, I vote no, because as much as I would like to believe that a lot of people have a similar vision to me, everybody is fed up with Pokemon after Generation 9. They feel tired, they feel betrayed, and there's absolutely no reason as to why they spent as much money as they did on that game for it to look and feel like that when other games from other franchises have just done so much better these past couple of years in terms of taking care of the actual game. Unfortunately, it is one of the most risky moves that they could make, and a lot of people might actually go ahead and skip out on it if they were to do that this time, even if the game did look and feel a lot better. It would simply possibly be too late for way too many people. They simply would not be able to get away with it like they did back during the DS era with Pokemon Emerald and Pokemon Platinum. And if it were to end up as a failure, I don't know. I feel like it would just be too generally risky for the mindsets of the developers and the higher ups at Pokemon thinking, okay, they really just do not like what Scarlet and Violet offered, which is simply not true. But overall, it's a big risky money move. And in a game like this one, where money is the loudest speaker, it's very, very risky. However, if it were me up at Pokemon International, maybe possibly pulling the trigger on a decision like a Definitive Edition or Pokemon Magenta, I would absolutely pull it multiple times. Go, do it. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet's world, specifically the Paldea region, I really do think deserves another chance before we leave it in the past forever. So many fun ideas, concepts, characters, and story that simply did not have enough time to be fleshed out because it was the next big thing that needed to be here as soon as humanly possible. I just think that taking that time to fix up the frame rate, the graphics, maybe adding in a couple of ideas that didn't get the chance to get fleshed out in the originals as far as mechanics go, and then on top of that, adding all of the DLC into that package would make that the premium Generation 9 package right there. That would be just delicious, man. Absolutely delicious. But hey, you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and stop myself right there because this is the definitive edition of a pipe dream, okay? We don't know what's coming. That source code could have meant absolutely nothing in the grand scheme of things, and on the off chance that it was a Pokemon Magenta or definitive edition in some way, shape, or form, it is very possible that nothing that I mentioned here would even be on the table. It could be something much more mundane, much more simple, and something that is bound to flop because, you know, they gotta make big money moves as soon as possible, and they will not stop at that. But hey, you know what? Maybe that's just me. So that just about does it for this one. Sorry, I talked about Scarlet and Violet again. I know, we have been talking about Scarlet and Violet for 2 years straight. It is absolutely ridiculous. We're probably gonna go on to 3 because if we're being super realistic, there's no way we're not gonna at least talk about Scarlet and Violet in some form in 2025, which we are getting very, very close to. So hey, you know, if you're still here at this point, if there's anything else you want me to talk about or cover at the end of this year, before we move into 2025, let me know, because I have a couple of things that I want to do. There's a couple of projects that I'm still in the midst of that might bleed over into 2025. If I could get this one project done at the end of the month by the end of the month for December, I feel like you guys would really, really enjoy that. But I could also save that as the big starting point for 2025 as well. But I don't know, we'll have to see what happens there. But with that, I think that just about does it for me. So I'm gonna go ahead and pass the mic over to you guys, and I want you guys to tell me everything that you guys are thinking in the comment section below. Do you think that a definitive edition is possible? Do you think that it's something that's actually in development? Do you think that my ideas here are something that could actually work for Pokemon or Generation 9 specifically? Or do you think that this is all absolutely ridiculous? They should absolutely not do that, and you know that the source code thing is a bunch of BS and it means absolutely nothing. Tell me everything that you guys are thinking in the comment section below, because you know for a fact that I am always going to be down there with you guys. But with that, it does appear to be skedaddle o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and do just that. I would like to thank you guys ever so much for watching. I truly do hope you enjoyed. Do me the greatest favor of dropping a like and a comment, and consider subscribing for more content just like this here. And with that, I'm Gonzo. Thanks again, hope you enjoyed, and I'll be seeing you guys in the next video. Do me the greatest favor of taking good ass care, and I'll see you all next time.